We're together, yes we're dating, and it's going really bad, but we don't want all our friends to know that we are really sad.
This is YouTuber and comedian Gus Johnson, and this is a video he uploaded in early 2018, where he and his then girlfriend Sabrina sang about the failing couples on Facebook.
Maybe then our pals will think we're filled with smiles instead of frowns.
She's the best.
She's the one.
So impressed.
Having fun when it comes to happy couples, we are couple number one. Our mission is accomplished.
We faked another day,
And though we're filled with pain, we'd rather stuff it all away.
But little did we know that this light-hearted satirical song would become a reality in one of the most unexpected public relationship dramas that the internet had ever seen. Let's introduce the players. Gus Johnson, a well-loved creator known for his viral skits, sketches, and commentary videos. Chances are you've probably seen some of his content before. He's been on the platform since 2010, although he really gained popularity around mid-2015 with his first viral video, How to Get Free Food from Subway.
Hi, I'm Gus Johnson. Today I'm Gus Johnson, and today I'm going to show you how to get free food from Subway.
His popularity would continue to grow pretty steadily from there, yielding many more viral videos as well as some collaborations with some pretty popular creators. 2018 in particular was a great year for Gus Johnson on YouTube. He had countless viral videos to his name, a successful podcast run with co-host Eddie Burback, and an incredibly loyal fanbase following the boys support boys mantra. But obviously, you can only see what a creator wants you to see. And behind the scenes, things in Gus's personal life were being put under great strain. It now becomes important to shift focus from Gus to Abelina Sabrina, who, in addition to being a YouTuber and comedian, has also done voice work and currently runs a political Twitch stream. Sabrina began dating Gus in late 2017, and it didn't take long for them to start creating content together on their respective channels. However, not long into their relationship, Sabrina and Gus's life would be shaken by a distressing health crisis that would leave its mark on them for years to come. Fast forward to October 2021, and Sabrina opened up about these issues in a compelling and emotional 24-minute video, where she discussed a pregnancy that nearly ended her life. Obviously, I can't do the video justice here, so I encourage you to watch the entire thing on Sabrina's channel. However, I'll summarize it as best I can.
So years ago, I found out that I was pregnant, and I did not want to be. I was not ready for that. I made a doctor's appointment. So they referred me out to Planned Parenthood. I, made the appointment there.
Although she always knew the plan was to terminate her pregnancy, as this was something her and her partner agreed upon, the clinic placed many doubts into her head, constantly checking with her that this is really what she wanted. Of course, her partner was on the other end of this and shut down Sabrina at every turn.
So it was really scary to be receiving all this conflicting pressure from medical staff and your body to not do it, and then being pressured by your partner to do it. It felt like I didn't even have a choice. And I did have moments of weakness where I would cry and say things like, okay, but honestly, can we just consider, what if we didn't do it? Still gonna do it, but can we just consider what would happen if I didn't? He would say, no, it's not even a question. You're gonna ruin my life if you do that. That would be the worst thing to ever happen to me. And at one point, he even said that he would break up with me if I didn't do it, and that he would resent me and the potential child.
And while all of this was bad enough, this was only the start of Sabrina's problems. In trips to Planned Parenthood, they weren't seeing anything on the ultrasound, even though Sabrina was at the stage where they should have been able to see something. Appointments were delayed further, leaving Sabrina to go home without any answers alone, a common theme in this medical nightmare.
I woke up at about 4 a.m. to the most intense pain I've ever felt in my life in my lower left abdomen. And it was so sharp and painful. I went to the doctor multiple times. And one of the first times I went, the lady was just like, well, just take some Tylenol and go home. What do you want me to do? And then I went again later that day because I was still having so much pain. And they said, oh, you're probably miscarrying. Go bleed it out at home.
She requested imaging and further examination multiple times, but she was turned away. So she persisted, still holding down a job while in unidentified and unimaginable pain, taking medication in order to manage it.
I was at work. And then all of a sudden, the weirdest painful sensation came over me again. But this time, it made me really dizzy and faint, and my heart was just racing, and I had this pain in my lower abdomen. I just knew something was wrong. And so I left work early. I called my boyfriend, and I told him, something's wrong. I'm going to the hospital again. I don't feel well. Something is wrong. And he said, okay, well, I have work to do, and it involves other people, and then we're gonna go out and get dinner and drinks with them. So I had to go to the hospital alone, and I was there for about 4 hours by myself.
Sabrina finally got the in-depth ultrasound that she had requested all this time and waited alone until her partner showed up moments before the diagnosis.
I had an ectopic pregnancy in my left fallopian tube. It ruptured. I've been bleeding internally ever since. They were surprised I wasn't dead, and that if I don't have surgery right then and there, I was going to die for sure. And as an added bonus, the surgery might not go well, and I might die during that too. Here, sign these waivers and paperwork, because you don't have a choice anymore. Anyway, so surgery finished, and I didn't even consent to this because clearly, I was under general anesthesia and barely waking up. I did not consent to being kicked out at 3 a.m., but they did. They wheeled me out, and I couldn't even really stand up all that well by myself. I was extremely nauseous, and it was awful.
Critiques of the American medical system aside, Sabrina was still left with postpartum symptoms and an incredibly fragile state of mind. She couldn't tell her family or most of her friends what had happened out of shame, and that left only one person for her to lean on.
It was just the worst, and boyfriend started to resent me. And so I tried bottling it up even more and not telling him until I was absolutely certain that I needed to go to the doctor and I would not be able to drive myself. I try really hard to be independent, but sometimes I just can't. And at one point, he was talking about how hard it was having to take care of me when I would have those moments. Mind you, I never stopped him from doing anything or going anywhere. He still continued to live his life as if nothing ever happened. And there I am in the background, in the shadows, just trying to pretend that I don't feel like I'm dying. And then he would sometimes tell me things like, someone else would have left you by now, right? And then it would get to the point where I would ask for help, take me to, urgent care, please, I can't drive myself. And he would say oh, well, call the advice nurse and then I'll take you. And then he would insist on listening to the phone call to make sure that I wasn't exaggerating my symptoms. Or even when he would come with me a few times to the doctor, he would, sit in and correct the doctor on things that I was saying from his point of view because he didn't want me to exaggerate my symptoms. It was a lot. But it just felt like I had to grow up even faster, and it sucked.
It's important to note that Sabrina kept the name of her partner anonymous in this video, but in the hours after the video's release, the internet wasted no time collecting their evidence and reaching the unfortunate yet obvious conclusion that the partner kept anonymous in this video was Gus Johnson. People scrolled back on Gus's Instagram and found a post talking about Sabrina being in the hospital that matched up with the dates in Sabrina's video. This was later confirmed by Sabrina on Twitter, where she was found liking tweets that mentioned Gus by name, as well as in her YouTube comments, where she replied to people also mentioning Gus by name. It was further discovered that the obligation that Gus had on the night Sabrina went to the hospital alone was actually a podcast recording that he did with Parker Games. People also started to look back at Sabrina's catalog, namely to her video about getting her rhinoplasty. In this video, she spoke further about Gus's neglect during the recovery process and how he was streaming opening Pokemon cards while Sabrina was going through pain and suffering in the other room.
My Gus helped me fall asleep earlier because I was really struggling. And then he hopped back on to go stream. And he was just like, the second you want me to come back, I'll come back. No questions asked. I'll be right back. Don't worry. I was like, okay. And that made me feel secure. And I texted him multiple times while he was streaming. So just okay, look, you're almost done? Question mark. Are you coming back soon? What's up? And he would just say oh well, I have to do 10 more. Like, it's an obligation at this point. I just wait a little bit, please.
Within the following days, a creator that was once seen as rock solid began to erode. And with all of this, people naturally started to demand a response. And 4 days later, we got just that. I'm aware of a recent video that calls out some actions that I'm not proud of, and I want to apologize. The circumstances were incredibly hard and complicated for the both of us, and I can't even begin to imagine how difficult it was for her. We were young and not remotely prepared to deal with all the realities of a long-lasting and traumatic medical situation. During the talks, counseling, and therapy we went through together following this time, I came to grips with my behavior and realized my shortcomings, and I would like her to know just how deeply sorry I am. I fully realized what I did was wrong, and I wish I could change how I responded and acted during that time. I've grown a great deal since that happened, and I wish I knew then what I know now. I will continue to grow and learn and strive to be a better person every day. At this time, I'm stepping away from the podcast, and the remainder of this year's live shows will be cancelled with full refunds being issued. I will also be taking some time off from posting and working for a while. Unfortunately, this apology fell flat for a lot of people, including Sabrina, who publicly denounced Gus's statement. Gus's close friend and collaborator Eddie Burback also mentioned how hurt he was to find out that there was so much more to the story than what he'd been told over the years. Sabrina responded to this tweet with support. At this point, the majority, especially on Twitter, were on Sabrina's side. But the internet moves on pretty quickly, and people would stay mostly silent on the situation until around 6 weeks later, where Gus made an unprompted and ill-timed return with a sketch about somebody childishly exaggerating an injury for attention and sympathy. Maybe not the most optical sketch for a return. I feel like he may have gotten away with all of this scot-free if the topic of the sketch was something else entirely. He also posted this on Twitter, where all the hostility was going down, which was probably not the best move. He got ratioed pretty badly. Naturally, Gus's return got people talking about the situation all over again. The comments on this video were also completely unmoderated, which led to people previously unaware of the situation finding out about it for the first time. All of this prompted Eddie Burback to address the situation on stream, which was promptly clipped up and posted to YouTube.
I mean, I saw you guys pretty much all assuming it. Like, the podcast is not coming back. I don't want to get into private details too much because that makes me uncomfortable. But if I'm being honest with you, like, trust between us from me is completely broken, and I just can't work with him in the future. He knows already, I told him, but I just don't feel comfortable doing it.
At this point, the drama had gotten much larger than it initially was, with this specific stream clip amassing over 700,000 combined views over separate uploads. And when a drama gets that big, it's pretty hard to just ignore it, especially when YouTube viewers begin to find out. Gus needed to address it one final time, and he did just that around 8 weeks later, where he uploaded a video talking about the last few months.
Hi everyone, I'm sorry I didn't make this video sooner. I stepped away from social media for the last 3 months to really reevaluate everything that's going on in my life right now, and I'm here to talk to you today about everything that's been happening. I think that during that time, I was so close to the situation that I was not able to fully realize and understand the pain that my partner was going through, and I was not able to fully understand the impact that I had on that situation. As the medical situation continued to last for many months with no end in sight, there were just times that I just said some stupid stuff and some things that just caused my partner additional hurt. This medical situation happened over 3 years ago, and we continued to date for a few more years after that happened. And during those few years, we talked about this medical time a lot, and we sought couples therapy together and individual therapy, and this was discussed at length. And I think that it just took me a while to really realize my shortcomings during this time and the impact that I had on my partner in this terrible period, and how my words and actions made the situation worse. And that was something that was hard to realize and just made me feel very foolish and remorseful for my behavior at certain periods during that time. My partner and I split up a few months ago, and I'm glad that she's finding a new sense of self. And I'm really glad that she feels comfortable sharing this story as part of her healing journey, and I hope she keeps doing it. I'm sorry that I caused her hurt during this time, and I'm sorry that I was not the partner that she needed during this really difficult period. And the hurt is extended beyond that. There are a number of people who engage with my content or who I work with professionally that have been negatively affected as a result of my actions and my words. And I just would like to extend my sincerest apologies to these people as well. I hate disappointing people. I hope that my former partner can use this moment in time to heal and find some peace. And I wish her the best.
Despite the obvious inconsistency with Gus saying that he spent 3 months off of social media, this was honestly not a terrible response. He took responsibility for his actions and didn't try to blame anyone else for what happened. And he even supported Sabrina making the video and speaking about her experiences. This was also going up on his main channel, where the numbers were obviously in his favor, which led to an increased number of people supporting Gus in the comments. This should have been where the situation ended, but it seemed Gus made even more errors in this response, with Sabrina tweeting that she had never been to couples therapy a day in her life. A clear contradiction to what Gus said in his video.
We sought couples therapy together and individual therapy, and this was discussed at length.
This then turned into a pretty ugly Twitter back and forth, with Gus tweeting receipts showing the sessions that were paid for, and Sabrina clapping back with a pretty scathing response. Unlicensed TikTok dating coaches are not therapists. These sessions were not regarding my pregnancy or PTSD at all, but mainly centered around Gus's desire to fuck other people and have me be okay with it. While Gus was clearly winning with the numbers on YouTube, it was pretty clear where people's allegiances lay on Twitter, with Sabrina brutally ratioing Gus's tweet. She did later delete this for reasons unknown, but by that point, the further damage to Gus's image had already been done. Shortly after, Sabrina posted her final statement on Twitter. She established that she never wanted to vilify Gus, but that she just wanted to share her struggle, and according to Sabrina, Gus never attempted to reach out to her privately. She also felt that Gus's apologies had not been sufficient and that he did not represent the situations fairly, adding that she needed to accept that true accountability may never come. Her instincts thus far were to correct the record, but it hadn't given her the closure that she was seeking, so she intended to no longer engage with the topic. Since Gus also indirectly mentioned Eddie Burback in his response, Eddie also streamed a little later, where he addressed it one final time, probably because his chat was being spammed with people asking for his thoughts.
I feel like I was put in a position, I was streaming an hour later, and there's an apology sort of to me without mentioning me at the end. It's not enough for me, but I don't need more. I don't want more. So I don't expect it of him. I don't want it of him. I want to keep moving on for it. And this would really be the last thing I'd say, because it's just like, I don't want more from this. And you guys have been cool and we've been enjoying the stream, but it's like this weird elephant in the room that I feel like I had to address because I'm streaming an hour later.
This clip was also uploaded to YouTube and got over 400,000 views. For a lot of people, just seeing how done Eddie was with Gus and the whole situation actually held a lot more weight than any of Gus and Sabrina's responses. Eddie was a close friend of Gus, working with him on content and their collaborative podcast for over 3 years. People argued that he wouldn't just drop Gus completely if it wasn't serious, and the fact that he wanted nothing to do with him really stuck with people. These statements were seen by millions of eyes, and if Eddie had stayed silent, I think the situation would have stayed rather small, and Gus would have gotten pretty minimal backlash. However, since the controversy first began in October, Gus has lost a total of 300,000 subscribers. Conveniently, very close to the amount of people subscribed to the Gus and Eddie podcast. Over the coming months, Gus would power through, continuing to upload sketches despite the subscriber loss. And although his views weren't as high as they were before, he still managed to collaborate with some other YouTubers in the process. But in the background, people were still talking, speculating, and calling Gus some of the worst names in the book. While Gus was previously described as being a dismissive, insensitive, and irresponsible boyfriend, he was now being called abusive, manipulative, and incapable of feeling any empathy. As someone watching from the sidelines, these hyperbolic characterizations started to unsettle me a little bit. It does often happen that when one side is given all the airtime, the story does become massively skewed in that direction. There are always two sides to every story, and it didn't even feel to me like Gus even had an opportunity to explain himself properly. Any additional response to the drama would have been seen as drawing it out, or making Sabrina relive her trauma, or swinging his large fanbase around to intimidate others. But at the same time, I believe that Gus really felt like he needed to say something, whether that be to correct the record or just get things off his chest. But it couldn't be on his own platform. Instead, he went on to another content creator's platform, Pay Money Wubby, to finally speak his side. He spoke to Wubby on stream on the 7th of April for almost an hour, and it definitely shed some light on things we weren't previously aware of, and it painted a slightly different picture of Sabrina and her motivations. I've done my best to condense it here, but obviously I'm not able to do it full justice, so I'll link the full conversation in the description.
I would love for an opportunity to kind of like share some stuff. And I just want people to know up front that my intention here is to not try to discredit or disrespect anybody, but maybe just like clear up some common misconceptions that have been out there for a few months. You know, this has been something that I've had to deal with every day for the last half of a year, and it's dominated a lot of my life. So I just wanted to kind of come in here and just talk a bit about some of it. So she and I had talked a number of times about what would happen if she did become pregnant. And we had both agreed that since we were really young, neither of us really had any money, we couldn't give a good life to a child. So we had agreed that, you know, if a pregnancy did occur, that we would seek termination. It really worried me right away that Sabrina began to express a change of her mind in regards to what we would do with the kid. And I didn't deal with that in a very mature way. I was really fearful.
But there was a lot of implied pressure to the point where a lot of people called abuse of the abortion. They're taking what she said and they're expanding on it, that like you weren't open to conversation, there was stonewalling. Do you want to elaborate on that at all? Is that how it went?
I can't speak too much to the minutia of conversations that I had, 4 years ago, but, we did talk about this a lot. I didn't say that we shouldn't talk about it, but at the same time, I recognized that some of the language that I was using was not the most conducive to a very team-oriented approach of like, what do we do here? I was just really afraid what to do, and we just weren't ready for the situation. And I think that sometimes I just said some stupid stuff.
You went quiet, and then we got an apology, and we got a few different responses. Can you maybe explain how you were feeling at the time? Was it a blindside? Did you know it was coming?
No, I did not know that it was coming. It was a complete blindside. This situation happened before her video came out. It had happened about 3 years prior. We had stayed together for the 3 years after that. And during this time, we talked about this situation a lot. I apologized for just the dumb stuff that I said and I did during some of that time. And it was a really painful, traumatic experience for both of us. And I thought that it had been dealt with within the context of a relationship. In any of the 3 years since this happened, she had not expressed any interest in sharing this story publicly at all. So I was undoubtedly blindsided by this situation. And unfortunately, after that topic situation, that was really just the tip of the iceberg. In the months and, the year that followed the surgery, she and I went to so many doctor's appointments together, saw dozens of specialists and went to countless emergency rooms and urgent cares. Our lives day to day were pretty heavily dictated by this situation. It was not uncommon for many of the days a week to have some semblance of an episode with Sabrina occurring. 95% of the time, she would be having trouble communicating and would be hyperventilating. Sometimes I would get frantic phone calls while she was driving and afraid that she might pass out, or she would be waking me up in the middle of the night and insisting that, we should go to the emergency room or the urgent care. And she'd always say, it's different this time. It's different this time. It was not uncommon for us to have a few days in a row where both of us were getting just a couple hours of sleep at night. I didn't know what to do anymore. And the thing is, during this time that lasted for months, there were just times where I was so exhausted. I got frustrated at the problem, at the situation. It seemed like it wasn't getting better. And sometimes I said some stupid, flippant, short things. I've since apologized for these things. It's embarrassing. These weren't things that I woke up in the morning and just said to her. This was born out of a constant state of fear and exhaustion and frustration. And that does not make them okay. We got to the end of the year and it just was so clear that we tried everything we need to break up. And it was pretty shortly after we did privately break up that I was watching the dog one weekend and she came back to get some stuff from my house and to get the dog. And this was before I put out the public statement. I was texting her that morning saying, I want you to weigh in on what we have to say. I don't want to put out anything without checking in with you. I understand that we're both public individuals and I just don't want anybody's interpretations of us to fall on the other side. Let's work on this statement together. She surprised me because she came back in and she had brought me some gifts and said that she wanted to get back together with me, that she was sorry that it didn't work out and she didn't want to give up. And she said she wanted to come back into my life. And I just looked at all the effort that we had put in the last year. And I just thought that we had really given it as much of a try as we possibly could. And I just said, I'm sorry, I'm not there. I don't think it's a good idea. And she screamed at me and said, you put out whatever you want, but don't say it was mutual. That's a lie. And she slammed the door and left my house. Whoa. And then really shortly afterwards, this video came out. She took to Twitter the same day that the video came out, and she was liking tweets and retweeting things from random users that I just feel like really unfairly mischaracterized me. It was beyond stuff like that too. She took to creating memes about me and the situation and continued to post about this. And unfortunately, it didn't just stop from a public front. She took to a lot of my friends and people that I do business with that aren't publicly personalities as well and tried to get them to stop working with me, tried to cut off connections. I know this because in the last half of a year, I've had a number of these people come to me personally and just say that she made them feel extraordinarily uncomfortable by the kind of conversations that she had with them following this video. I've been really gearing up for a big tour this year. And that involved working with and collaborating with a number of folks. We put a lot of time and energy into this. And it just got to the point with my expectant hiatus during this whole situation that I didn't have enough time to really dedicate to this tour and stuff. And I had to cancel this. It was probably a few weeks ago at this point. Mm-hmm. I announced on Instagram that I had to cancel the tour. And then within about an hour of that, she tweeted out, "That's showbiz, baby," with an exclamation point on there.
With regards to Sabrina's video, do you have any, you kind of touched on this briefly, but I do just want to make sure I ask it directly. Do you think that she had some sort of intent behind it, whether it be the video or her activity on Twitter? Or do you think all of it was just her way of sharing her truth as a way of healing?
That's a really tricky question. I think that given all the context that I laid out here, with her not expressing to me that she did want to share that previously to this was never something that was talked about. It was immediately after a breakup, and it was immediately after her trying to re-enter in my life and then me declining that. It's hard to think that of somebody that you spent 4 years of your life with. I don't want to think that of her, but it's very difficult for me, and the behavior that she's exhibited in the last 5 months, it's hard for me to draw any other conclusion other than the fact that she was extraordinarily upset with me and wanted to try to damage me in some regards. And again, I am not saying that to try to discredit her situation and what she went through, but it really seemed like that was utilized as a way to try to pull some terrible out of context situations and tack together a really scathing review of a person and their reputation.
This interview was definitely shocking to listen to. Hearing Gus's side of the story, which at this point had been completely ignored, definitely added a lot more context to the situation, and again, I would invite all of you to watch the entire thing linked below. However, despite what anyone might say, Gus definitely flung a lot of mud towards Sabrina in this interview. He presented a lot of claims that obviously don't have any evidence backing them up, so you pretty much just have to trust Gus's word. I understand his frustration about something that, from his perspective, was an intentional attempt to damage his career, but I would have appreciated a little more of a measured approach from him, or even from Wubby, when these claims were made. Despite all of that though, it's definitely worth a watch. For a short while after this interview was up and released, the general public seemed to be on Gus's side again. People were sympathizing with him in the comments, and part of that probably had to do with Gus going on Wubby's stream, someone that had been critical of Sabrina's video in past streams. However, this piece didn't last for long, as Sabrina had a few things to say and address about Gus's appearance, which she did a few days later on her own stream. However, instead of watching the conversation from start to finish, she picked and chose what to respond to, not even playing any clips from the interview. She even presented some new information about Gus in an attempt to drag him down even further.
There was a moment where after my surgery, maybe more than a few days after my surgery, I don't remember, but it was certainly shortly after the surgery. At one point, he said he was glad it was ectopic because then neither of us had to choose and the choice was made for us and it worked out. So happy. So glad it was ectopic. So happy to not have one of my organs anymore. So happy to have a slight reduction in fertility. So happy to have a higher risk of this happening to me again. So happy to have lasting nerve damage. But hey, at least I didn't have to choose. But one day, in the living room, I just felt it coming on. And this one was a weird one too, because my face went numb, my tongue went a little numb, and I started slurring my speech a little bit. And I had chest pain, shortness of breath, abdominal pain, dizziness. I felt like I couldn't stand. And I asked if he could please take me to the doctor. And at first he said no. He said to call my insurance's advice nurse. And then if they think that it's severe enough, then he'll take me. I was upset, understandably, but I left to the other room and I started making the call anyway. Had the phone to my ear, and then he came in, and he insisted on listening to the phone call. I said no, and he tried to take my phone away from me, so I wasn't gonna let that happen. And so to try to keep my phone with me and on my ear, I tangled it into my hair like this to try to keep it there, thinking, you're not gonna touch it. You're not gonna touch me. And I was wrong. My hair got pulled while trying to steal my phone from me hard. And that's when I just absolutely broke down sobbing because I did not expect that.
As with Gus's claims about Sabrina, these obviously have no evidence to back them up, and it all comes down to whether you believe the individual person or not. And personally, that isn't really a standard that I like to use when judging the validity of allegations. In the stream, Sabrina also acknowledges that she did ask Gus about getting back together, but she had some issues with his retelling of events.
About a week or 2 weeks after we had broken up, I had to fly to Mexico to my sister's wedding. My life was so different. 1 week we were looking at houses to get together, and the next week I'm living alone in a hotel trying to handle my PTSD because one of the things about it was that I couldn't sleep alone. So I was starting to reconsider oh my gosh, was this a mistake? Because at least I knew how to maneuver in that life, and I panicked a little bit. And so that part is is true. When I got back from Mexico, because he was watching Eva for me, I really didn't actually picture us getting back together. But in my mind, I think I just wanted to know that I tried my best, that I did everything that I possibly could, and then it would like be out of my hand. I was actually even texting a friend, but yeah, he got there. I had some packages. I was picking up Eva. I said, hey, I think maybe we could try to work on it. I'm sorry for my part in this. Do you want to try? And he looked at me and he said, I don't know what to say to that. And that was all I needed to hear. I just said, okay, got quiet. Because again, if I'm upset, I don't yell, I don't scream, I don't do any of that. And I had my old senior dog with me who was like very easily startled. Like, I'm not gonna yell. The fuck? I'm not. Everybody who knows me knows that I am not like a yelling person. That's not me. That was just a blatant lie. That I screamed at him and that I slammed a door. First of all, why would I slam a door? I have my dog with me. I'm not gonna risk squishing her little foot. I don't slam doors. I'm not the one who does that.
Sabrina also addressed Gus's claims that she tried to turn his friends against him, and the conversations between Sabrina and Gus's friends had made them uncomfortable.
I just wanted to confirm because I know that after the breakup that I made a conscious effort to not make people feel like they had to cut ties with Gus. I made sure I said, I understand if you still want to be friends. That's totally fine. And then they would ask me like what happened. And then obviously I would tell them about like some of my experiences and some that I don't want to share on stream. But I would have these conversations and, you know, people just made their choices on their own. And so in the last 24 hours, I followed up with a number of friends. And the thing is, there's a big circle overlap in a lot of these friend groups where if anybody ever felt like I was trying to manipulate them into cutting ties with him, then somebody would have heard about it by now. But even when I'm not around, I am now being told that when I wasn't around, if people talked about it, people were in solidarity with me and people made choices on their own.
Sabrina also concedes in this stream that she didn't blame Gus for starting to get fed up having to deal with her constant episodes, something that I wish would have been made clearer in her video and statements.
I didn't blame Gus for starting to get real tired of having to help me when these PTSD episodes were happening. Hell, I didn't want them to happen. Yeah, I don't blame him for being tired of having to help me that much because it was a lot. It was a lot. And at one point he started to get angry when I would express that it felt like I was starting to have an episode. So I started to try to keep it to myself and I would try to drive myself to the doctor. And most of the time I did. It was only when I couldn't that I really, really, really asked him to like drive me or something.
As one of the last things addressed, she also presented her defense to the tweet that she made directly after Gus's tour was cancelled, which in my opinion leaves a lot to be desired.
I didn't know when his tour was canceled. I don't keep up with any of that. And I just happened to tweet. I don't know if I was like listening to like Chicago or if I saw like a TikTok or something, but I just happened to tweet that's showbiz, baby. Like I was like, 1920s kind of vibe. But I didn't realize until he said it like in the interview that like I guess that tweet came after he canceled the tour. I had no idea. I don't keep up to date with him. Like I am purposely trying to keep all of his stuff off of my feeds, like out of sight, out of mind. And it has been great. It has been so helpful. So that one actually kind of made me laugh. I thought that one was pretty funny. That's showbiz, baby.
After this stream, a final video by a friend of Sabrina's, nickisnotgreen, was released. This video went over the interview between Gus and Wubby, and it later became incredibly popular, garnering over 600,000 views. However, as someone who was actually leaning towards Sabrina's side while doing research for this video, I felt the Nick's video uncharitably clipped a lot of the interview and drew many conclusions that just weren't fair at all. I actually watched both the interview and Nick's video for the first time right after each other, and I just disagreed with a bunch of the framing especially. I feel like this may have been a spur-of-the-moment thing that he wrote and released, and he probably should have had someone more neutral look it over. I 100% understand that he wants to fight for his friends, but I believe it's also important to recognize that as a friend of Sabrina's, his view could be pretty biased, and you have to keep that in check while making videos like these. And indeed, we as viewers also have to be vigilant when watching videos by people who could be biased as well. I obviously don't think Nick is a bad guy for this, but I thought it was something that was important to mention since his video is pretty much the last thing I've seen on the situation. I invite you to watch both the interview and Nick's video back to back and put on your critical thinking glasses, because I'm sure those of you at home may see some of the issues with it as well. On the internet, everyone feels like they need to take a side. People are being pulled constantly to one direction or another by creators on different ends, constantly fighting for their opinions and attention. But the truth is that sometimes there is no clear answer as to who is in the right and who is in the wrong. It's okay to not take a side. And I want to reiterate that with this situation as well. When I started researching this video, I'll admit it, I was expecting it to be a clear-cut situation of Gus being the terrible abusive boyfriend and for that to be the end of it. But the more I read, the more I watched, and the more I thought, I realized that there's no way I could call him that. Nothing in this situation is easy to understand, and anyone telling you that there's one person who is the guilty party is simply wrong. This situation essentially boils down to this. 4 years ago, a young couple in a fairly new relationship was shaken dramatically by an unforeseen medical event that no one could have prepared for. The failures of the doctors and the medical system led to the issues getting worse and worse until it exploded quite literally in the worst way possible. The trauma from that relationship affected not only Sabrina with PTSD from the experience as well as panic attacks and postpartum symptoms, but Gus as well, for having to deal with all of it. As Sabrina states, all of this was a big burden to put on one person, and you would expect frustration and even anger for having to commit so much time to all of this, especially if it kept on happening for many months. I can totally understand that in all these moments of frustration, Gus may have not said the best things. And while that doesn't excuse what he said, it does become more understandable as to why he said them. That, of course, doesn't mean Sabrina can't be upset at those things. I think anyone would be in this situation, and she's definitely allowed to open up about them. But the way she did it made it look like she was coming after Gus and trying to ruin him, while trying to protect herself with any plausible deniability by not mentioning him by name. I think she could have executed her videos and responses better, especially since Gus didn't go on the attack at any point prior to Wubby's stream. For anyone on the internet to pretend that they would have acted perfectly on either side of this situation is just lying to themselves. No one except for Gus and Sabrina knows all the ins and outs and complex emotional responses that was involved in this private relationship. And bringing it public just gives people online the opportunity to speculate when most people don't have any clue what even happened. The more people talk about this, the more messy it gets, and the less answers we have. Gus and Sabrina's relationship has two individuals and two sides. There isn't a clear winner, so why do we have to take one? Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.